Hello and welcome to the analysis of the Hindu newspaper dated April 4th, 2023. In this video, we are going to talk about two important newspaper articles which we have taken from the Hindu newspaper dated April 4th, and they are going to be very important, very significant for the civil services examination. So do watch this video till the end, and let's now start with the first important newspaper article. Now, the first newspaper article is an editorial, right? Now, we do not usually discuss the editorials in this particular analysis, but this particular editorial is very eye-catching and it talks about the carbon emissions, and that is why it is important for the GS paper 3, that is conservation, environmental pollution and degradation, environmental impact assessment, that is GS paper 3, right? Now let's first understand the context of it, and then we will talk about the pricing model which can be implemented in order to reduce the carbon emission, right? So now it is time, starting with the biggest economies of the G20, to agree on valuing nature, including by pricing carbon effluents. And India can take the lead in this regard because at this particular point of time, we have the presidency of the G20, which is very significant. And India can implement the carbon pricing mechanism in order to decarbonize, right? So now there are three ways in which India can do it, or India can lead the world in suggesting the decarbonization in three ways. Now, the first one is the establishment of a carbon tax domestically, as in Korea and Singapore. Now, if you act on this particular regard and you implement the carbon tax, then what is going to happen? People are not going to emit the carbon dioxide more. And similarly, it can be done that the use of an emissions trading system can be implemented just like as it is implemented in the European Union and the China, which means that the corporations can trade between themselves the carbon credits and they can benefit out of it. If I produce more of the carbon dioxide, somebody else can give me the carbon credits and I can benefit from it, and I can come within the permissible limits of the carbon dioxide emissions, right? Now the third point, or the third way of pricing the carbon emissions, is the application of an import tariff on the carbon content, as the EU is proposing. If the other country imports some of the carbons to my country or brings in carbons to my country, I will impose the import tariff, right? All of the products which are going to produce a lot of carbon emissions, import tariff I am going to impose on these countries, right? On these products, import tariff is going to be imposed. Now here, these are the three ways of decarbonizing or pricing the carbon emission. First one is the carbon tax, second one is the emissions trading system, and the third one is the application of import tariff on the carbon content, right? Now these are the three ways. Now how exactly is going to be the pricing mechanism? So the International Monetary Fund has proposed a price floors of $75, $50 and $25 a ton of carbon for the United States, China and India respectively, and it believes that this could help achieve a 23% reduction in the global emissions by 2030, because these three countries, United States, China and India, are the highest emitters of the carbon, right? And that is why this particular model has been suggested by the IMF, and this is going to reduce the carbon emissions by 23%. But what exactly will be the impact on India? How we can implement the pricing mechanism? So basically, among the three ways of pricing, India could find a carbon tax appealing, as it can directly discourage the fossil fuels. Carbon tax as in South Korea and Singapore, right? We are going to put a carbon tax on all the corporations which are emitting a lot of carbon dioxide or carbon emissions, right? And this will directly discourage the fossil fuels or using of the fossil fuels, and it will also raise the revenue which can be invested in cleaner sources of energy or used to protect vulnerable consumers. This is a win-win situation to the entire country by implementing the carbon tax. And in most of the countries, including India, fiscal policy is such that the basic structure has been set up for implementing the carbon tax. You need not to form a base on it. For example, they can be woven into road fuel taxes, which are established in most places and extended to industry and agriculture. And India could start now with the IMF figure of $25 a ton, $25 of taxes on a ton on the industries which are producing the carbon. Right. So now what exactly is the main obstacle in implementing the carbon tax? So the argument by the industrial firms is about losing their competitive advantage to the exporters from the countries with lower carbon price. For example, the other person in the other country produces much of the products like me, but I am being implemented carbon in my country, so the other person from the other country which have the lower carbon tax bracket, they will import, they will have a competitive advantage over me, right? And that is why it is the main obstacle, and it would stand to reason therefore for all high, middle and income countries to set the same rate within each bracket. But is it possible? No, it's not possible. We need to form a global concession on this, and then only it can be implemented, right? So that some other person is not at the disadvantage just because they implemented the carbon tax. Now, it might also make sense to allow companies to use high quality international carbon credits to offset up to a certain percentage of their taxable emissions. I can credit, or I can share the carbon credits with other person in the other country, and the other person can share the carbon credits with me. Internationally we can do that, and this will lead to taxable emissions going up, and at the same time the carbon emissions are very low. Now the EU excludes the transport where higher cost would have been passed on to the consumers directly. Now the government has reduced in this particular regard because it is for the general public interest. Now the Singapore provides vouchers for consumers hit by utility price rise, and the California state of United States uses proceeds from the sales of the carbon permits partly to subsidize purchases of the electric cars, and that is how they actually decrease the carbon emissions, and as well as the impact on all the people who cannot bear the cost of it, right? So what exactly can be the way forward in this particular regard? So any type of carbon pricing faces stiff political opposition. We all know that, because the politicians want to save their face. They do not want to implement these kind of policies. So political pressures on decarbonization, that is soaring energy prices, led the EU to sell millions of emission permits, causing a 10% drop in the carbon prices. So we can actually implement like the EU did. Now, communicating the idea of wins at the societal level, even in the presence of some individual producers' losses, is vital. If we can show the society that it is for the greater good, and it is for the greater good, if we can get through that message in very good ways, then this particular policies of decarbonization carbon tax can be implemented, right? So this is it regarding this particular newspaper article. Let's now head to the next important newspaper article. Now this particular newspaper article talks about some of the failures of the Swanidhi, right? It says that just 9.3% of the loans under the PM Swanidhi are given to vendors from the minority communities, right? These are some of the societal failures, but we are not going to talk about the societal failures. We are going to talk about this particular scheme, which has helped the vendors in the corona times, as well as now also it is helping the vendors, right? Now this kind of newspaper articles are important for the GS paper 2, that is government policies and interventions for development in various sectors and issues arising out of their design and implementation. Let's talk about this particular scheme, but before that, let's first understand the context of it. Now this particular newspaper article says that a total of 42.7 lakh loans amounting to 5,152 crore has been disbursed to street vendors under the PM Swanidhi, out of which only 3.98 lakhs or 9.3% under the hawkers from the were to the hawkers from the minority community, says the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs in the Rajya Sabha when asked upon this particular question. Now this particular thing is not very relevant for us. What's more relevant is the Swanidhi scheme, right? What exactly is the Swanidhi scheme? It is basically a micro credit scheme which was launched in 2020 to provide hand holding support to street vendors to tide over the pandemic induced economic stress. When the world was going through the economic stress during the pandemic, vendors were also the highest form of or they were the prime people who were affected by the pandemic because they couldn't do the street vending at that particular point of time. And then and there the government came with this particular scheme which basically provided or facilitated collateral free loans of 10,000 rupees with subsequent loans of rupees 20,000 and 50,000 with 7% interest subsidy. Now if you see the 7% interest subsidy, now this is basically very less. 7% interest rate. Now the street vendors can take the loans, they can actually run their household for a while, they can run the street vending for a while, and then they can stand on their feet, right? Now this particular scheme was very important during the pandemic, and today also it is helping the street vendors get on their foot as fast as they can. They provide the collateral free loans under the Swanidhi. Government provides the collateral free loans under the Swanidhi, right? So this is the scheme which was mentioned in this particular newspaper article, and this is it regarding this particular newspaper article, and this is it for the day. Thank you from my side. Do like and share the video, and if you have any doubts you can always ask me out in the comment section regarding any of the civil services examination, right? Any of the part of the civil services examination. So do also subscribe to this channel because it gives us motivation to put out new videos on a regular basis. So have a great day and goodbye.